Well, William, always great to catch up with you. Thank you so much for your time. A big night last night, looking at the moon. I understand the weather perfect in your part of the world.
Yeah, it was absolutely clear, not a cloud in the sky. And, as the eclipse happened, all the stars came out. It was quite spectacular, actually.
Fantastic. Well, that's great. Well, it's great that we've got a world to live in that we can appreciate those things, because it's all doom and gloom everywhere else pretty much, isn't it? What are your thoughts on the government's reaction to He Waka Eke Noa?
Look, I think on the whole, it's in the right direction. There are some things that the farming industry have pushed back on, and federated farmers and beef and lamb, etc. But and those are particularly around recognition of forest and sequestration. And also, the price setting. And I think, if I think about the price setting, there seems to be a lot of misinterpretation in the media. The proposal by He Waka Eke Noa never suggested that the industry was going to set the price. It was about who was going to give the advice, and they suggested industry should be giving that advice. I actually think that somebody clever should get together, put their heads together, some clever people, and build up a manual, a bit like the milk manual. And so it's completely objective about what the price is, rather than having it put within any sort of committee, which essentially can be gamed and can become political. So maybe we should have a price manual. That's probably going to be my recommendation.
So, William, you've been looking back at some of the suggestions and comments from the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment.
What Simon Upton suggested, and David Frame has written a paper for him just recently, was that we should start looking differently at methane and forests. And instead of thinking about it as just offsetting carbon dioxide with trees, think about fast carbon cycles and slow carbon cycles. And methane and forests are actually both in the fast carbon cycle. And what it comes down to is that, and this plays into the GWP star versus GWP 100 issue. And GWP star really looks at what is the warming effect of a constant amount of methane going out into the atmosphere, because methane only lasts for about 7 to 10 years in the atmosphere. So, and it's a hard concept to get around, but I spent some time earlier this year just doing the figures, and it comes out from my back of the envelope figures that if you emit 1 kilogram of methane a year, then over about 50 years that builds up to 10 kilograms of methane, and it doesn't get any more than that. So you can actually look at that as a constant, as a one-off. You can compare that to a one-off measure of carbon dioxide, and when you do the figures, it comes to about 1900 kilograms. But as I said before, but what that relates to in terms of forestry is that one sheep would be, if you planted 0.06 hectares in short rotation forests, you'd end up mitigating all of the future emissions from one sheep. And so I did some of those figures on my own property, and it gets pretty frightening, because we're about 4,500 hectares. We'd have to plant about 1,500 hectares of forest, of short rotation forest. But then if you look at, what about putting it in? That's about 5 times as much carbon sequestration. So instead of 1,500 hectares, you're down to about 300 hectares. And then if you look at the marginal cost, so that we've been asked to reduce by 10%, well, you're down to 30 hectares. So suddenly it becomes really manageable. And so my thoughts around the current system is to do two things. One is to have a mechanism whereby farmers could actually permanently offset their some of their methane emissions, and that be brought into the calculation. So you can set aside a certain amount of land, say I'm going to plant that permanently in in permanent forests or short rotation or native, and those would have different figures against them, and that would offset part of your methane emissions.
Do we need to look at trees currently not in the ETS and perhaps have them accounted for?
So what I think they should be able to do is to account for those, but actually change or modify the ETS to allow a waka eke noa to, so whatever that body is, to actually consolidate all of the non-ETS or non-registrable carbon sequestration and actually trade that into the ETS. So now you've got the ability for the agricultural industry to start pulling some money back from the ETS, and actually, and it would do what Simon Upton was talking about, and that is allow landowners to actually be in charge of their own destiny. So instead of farmers just selling wholesale to overseas carbon farmers, they could actually plant and strategically and tactically to across their farm in the best areas and actually offset their emissions. I just think it would put the incentives in a completely different space.